What up, y'all? Welcome back to No Less Streams. Gonna hop back in here today, do a little more live coding. Try to finish out this task kind of feature set that I was building. Well, that I needed to build for this app. Kind of the last major feature that I'm build for this MVP version before I go ahead and try and get it up on my server for production testing and everything. But yeah, I did some work kind of behind the scenes over the last few days working on this and another app and a few other things. If you were seeing my last stream where we were kind of doing this, you'll remember that we finished off pretty much mostly my notes feature that I wanted for this kind of project management app that I'm building. Last thing I wanted to do was build tasks, and honestly, that's kind of been a little bit of an endeavor. It took me about 2 days to kind of fully flesh out just the game plan and just everything that it's going to need to move forward. And I got that figured out for the last day or two. And then now just kind of like working on the actual implementation of everything and making sure everything works and kind of tweaking things, and then probably gonna have to touch up some design stuff, just always little tweaks that's gonna happen. Honestly, it's probably gonna take me to get it where I normally like something. It's probably gonna take me about probably the rest of this week at minimum to get it to a level that I think is production ready, because there's always just a bunch of little things that pop up that you might not think about in the moment. So that's what I'll be working on today on this stream. Probably gonna go for about 2 hours, see how far we can get, and yeah, start this server up. Start my server up. Make sure my Docker container is running. Yes. As you can see, a lot of this green text already kind of been filled out, fleshed out. Just the overall scaffold, the skeleton of the actual task and how they're going to be managed in the actual projects, which, I use 5.3 codex for that. For the most part, I use Opus for the planning, so it can kind of like go through your whole code base, examine everything that you have in there, see what kind of packages and dependencies you already have, and kind of come up with a pretty solid game plan of how to move forward. And obviously you have to tweak things and whatnot. I actually started on my process. I actually started on Gemini, just on the web, on my little tablet, just sitting down, watching shows, whatever, kind of brainstorming, talking through it, and kind of fleshing out what is possible, what isn't possible, maybe some roadblocks, some issues that I might run into. Really kind of like figuring out the nuts and bolts of what will make this feature set work and function the way that I have it in my mind. Honestly, that's been the biggest addition of AI for me when it comes to programming, is the planning ability, the ability to read your entire code base, its ability to pull from, maybe some features, some packages, some tools that you might not necessarily be aware of, but it can just show and give you a lot of kind of feedback in terms of what's the best way to accomplish the plan that you have in your head. Like, it does a pretty good job of taking what you have, and if you can clearly articulate it to a way that it will understand, it typically spits out a pretty good plan. So I planned it all out. It took me came in about 6 phases, obviously validations and schema and kind of working all that together. That's the core function of everything. That is honestly the biggest part of AI for me, is its ability to schema things out, to build the schema, to build the database, to build the fields and tables, because that can be a very tedious process, honestly, because there's a lot of fields you might not know you're going to need in the future. That it does a good job of like already kind of knowing that you're going to probably need this, so let's just go ahead and implement this. So I use it a lot for the planning phase of anything that I'm building, and then kind of go forward from there. I like to use Opus because it does a really good job of examining your entire code base and like having that whole context and building a plan. And then I like to use 5.3 codex, obviously, because it's way cheaper and it's actually pretty fast in terms of scaffolding things and building things and running on this agent side. So yeah, that's kind of been the process so far. I guess I can kind of like go over my double check everything that's been added from my agent running. Yeah, as you can see from not highlighted, but here it is. Here's the tables that added. Remove that. So I already had this table set up from the jump because I knew this is kind of the route I was going to go. This can be my project timeline events, meaning it's a way for me to take my messages and tasks and any other kind of feature set that I'm going to use in a project and combine them into one table so that I can easily kind of like lay it out in a timeline form, which is what I'm going for, because I want the messages, I want the task, and I want anything else that I need in the future to be kind of interleaved with each other. Like, so it's all reading in one chronological timeline. You don't need to keep diving through things. And the easiest way to do that is to create a kind of junction joint table that combines all those different things. So right now it's combining my messages and my task and putting them together in a table so that I can easily access them. It gives it its own creation date, all this stuff, and it makes it just it makes it so much easier when you're trying to like do something like this where you combine all these different tables and display them in a joint kind of fashion. So this is I already had this kind of mostly scaffolded. It added obviously task in here, task ID, added it to it so it can read the tasks that are being added. It added a project task table. Oh, matter of fact, just leave that for now. Added a project task table. See, simple stuff: ID, project ID, organization ID, created by referencing obviously users, the organizations, and the project, so that as its keys, assignee, type, status, title, description. I think I'm adding. This is just storage for the metadata of links for the tasks, which I will be going to further. But metadata it's pulling from its rich link embeds that I'm handling for my task, and then internal instructions deleted that. So it scouts a table. This is honestly, it's really good at doing stuff like this and identifying fields that you're probably going to want to index because you're going to be making a lot of calls, and it does a pretty good job of this and saves you a lot of time in terms of just building out the tables, especially if you're using Drizzle like I do. Then it adds the necessary tables to everything else, like the relations. So user relations gets created, task, all this stuff. It also does a good job of finding where you're going to need those relations and adds those project task relations. And then at the top, I had so my project task statuses, which again I fleshed out. If you do a lot of your prep work and planning and like really flesh out an attack plan, an implementation plan, so to say, and you really have it built out in different phases and steps, and then you feed it to something like an AI agent, it does a really good job. It doesn't leave a lot of room for ambiguity, because that's when you can kind of start getting off the rails and doing things that you don't necessarily want or expect that you're gonna have to go through and review and change later on. If you're very clear up front with your plan and you really kind of hammer down the details before you start and giving it things to just go off and run, honestly, it does a really good job. So like I had all this fully planned out. It wasn't just doing things on the fly. It knew exactly what I wanted, knew the statuses I wanted of what a task will kind of go through, and it knew the different type of tasks. It knew everything beforehand. So that's a very, very crucial part when you're working with AI, is you really wanted to give it the most clear context possible so that it can't just go off the rails and do things that you're not like asking for, because these are the guidelines. Here's the rails. Stay within those. Get to work, and it does a great job. So that's schema. That's kind of the core of everything. I believe it also touched on. Yeah, obviously create a lot of server files. There's a lot of coding that it saves you from doing. Honestly, doing this on my hand can be very, again, tedious, but it does a great job. This is a server function to pull the metadata from links that will be attached to tasks. So to say, I create a task. Can you upload, your contract or business assets that I need from a client, so to say. And then here's the link to my Dropbox, my Google Drive, wherever I have my storage. And then it will pull the link. It'll take that link. It'll pull the metadata information from that link. Kind of like when you post to social media, and it'll provide you the information that we need that I'm going to use to display in terms of link, pictures, whatever, description, and it'll come out in like a rich kind of card. Like I said, similar to how you would see if you share a link to social media or even WhatsApp or messages now, like it automatically creates this like rich link card, so to say. So this is kind of the function that it's doing. I did this on one of my bigger apps, my social media app, a while ago, so I got a pretty good grasp of how this works. It just reads all these different signals and pulls it, and then obviously you got to clean. Make sure you really have to clean the what's coming back, so you don't get malicious actors providing links and stuff that will either hack your system or hack users or whatnot, and phishing and everything. So there's some protections here, allowing only HTTP, HTTPS, no file routes, no local host. Like, it's very strict about that. Again, another function to help kind of reject common private IP ranges. I'm not going to necessarily show all that, but yeah, I mean, these are pretty well known in terms of what people try to use, and you kind of want to avoid these. And then read the actual body of what's coming back from the parsed data. And here's like the title, obviously OG metadata. Again, very common in social media, doing the same kind of things, favicon, all that, HTML. And then again, sanitized title, sanitized description, sanitize all your links before you display them, because that can open you up to some really bad things happening. And then honestly try to limit regex use because it can get very messy, but it did it here where it's getting the meta content. Overall, this is just to get the metadata and display rich kind of link along with my task. And then this is the actual task server file. I'm not going to go through all this, but this is very dense, I would say. Does a lot of, and it created a separate file to handle all my kind of data type objects, so that you can import them, export them where you need them, because they're going to be used in multiple different instances. It's just telling the shape it should expect from a project task. As you can see, ID, all these, and does it individually to make sure that you're not pulling things that can be necessarily sensitive. And then again, project task list response, URL metadata. It's just telling it TypeScript exactly, this is what I expect to receive back from these data type objects when you're creating a project. I mean, when you're creating a task, reviewing a task, whatever, like all these different places you're going to need. So it just created its own separate type file, since I'm going to be reading these all over the place. Then actual server task file is what is handling all of my these are just helpers right now, because it's handling all the actions I'm going to need. State transition is just meaning when I'm transitioning a task from, let's say, pending to in progress or in review or completed. This is just kind of handling that. More helpers, more way to get the actual tasks by ID. And then it's the actual function to create project tasks. Inserting it, that is pending, type A. Same. The default should be yeah. I guess. And then here is to handle updating. Only allowing updating if the status is pending. So if it's not, then we throw a 400 response. This is just a outside external function to this that I had created a long time ago to assert that you are actually a member of the organization, that you can do, you can change the task and whatnot. Again, transition status. Full file handles that. Did pretty well on initial glance. Here's the actual API call that the routes are going to be making when it comes to creating a project, updating, project deleting, all those kind of actions is going to be hitting this API route. All these are just, safeguards, making sure that you can actually do these. Great. And you see it's calling that function from the other server file. It's actually creating a project task and filling in the fields that it expects for its type. Update. I like to do these in a switch kind of field right now because it's just much easier to read switch based on the intent. The case is create or the case is update. And then when you're in your actual file, when you call the API, you just give it this actual intent equals this, and then it knows, okay, transition status, okay, here's the case that's going to run what you need it to run. That's how I like to do it. You could also do it in like a lot of if blocks, but personally I like to do I just like to handle it in switch. Honestly, it's just much easier to read and parse later on, because a lot of times when you start building a lot of things, you kind of start to forget a little bit, like, okay, what does this do, and it's just very clear in terms of this, in this case do this, in this case do this. So that's generally how I like to do it. Give me work. I'm sorry, man. I got no work for you. This is just all on my own right now. And then my actual task file, this is the list of the task that's going to be on my project field. And then this is the file of my actual individual task that's going to be displayed. And then I know it did a lot of work here in terms of the actual project index. Probably gonna be some things I need to clean up. I don't like doing too many calls in the client. And what I found a lot of times with these AI agents is they do typically, not always, sometimes they don't always make the clear distinction between what should be server and what should be client. And they do some things in client that I prefer to be handled on the server side. All right, I mean, I didn't do too bad of a job. Let's just go ahead and check it out. All right, like always, start here in your dashboard when you log in. You can see, as I am the owner of this kind of workspace where this project might be the actual project lead. Yeah, so since I am the project lead of this actual project, when you come to your dashboard, which is what you'll see when you first log in, you'll see the projects that are assigned to you. That's what project lead is. And even though I am the owner, I wouldn't see it in my projects list. I might change that later, I'm not sure. But right now, it's strictly limited to either you're the client or you are the project lead, and that will show up in your project so that you can just automatically jump into that without having to come here to the workspace, then come here to the projects and see which projects are active and kind of find that. You can just directly come here from the dashboard and go to your projects. And then, as you see, I already kind of tested this out a little bit earlier. Need to clean this up. This is a test task. This is kind of the card implementation that I'm looking for. There's going to be a link here if you're the client, which I'll assign to later, and you'll see a start project, which will take you to the link because everything's going to be external right now. We're not going to store any things on our servers. Once you click the start, it's going to take you to either the Dropbox or wherever, DocuSign, wherever it needs you to complete the task. And then when you come back in here, going to click complete task, and then it goes off, handed off basically to the organization again. and members there are going to check it, make sure you did what was asked, and then mark this task as completed. So that's kind of the workflow, like kind of ping ponging back and forth between the workspace and organization, or and the client. The organization creates a task, post a link. You can also assign this to a member in your kind of workspace or your organization so that they get all the notifications and they are kind of the lead of said task. So then once you do that, you send it off to this field. It notifies the client that there's a new task waiting for them. I need to change this. They just threw this in here, but it's going to actually list the active tasks here that are waiting to either be reviewed by the organization or completed by the client. So I'm going to be listed here, but once it gets sent, it comes to this field to notify the client. Client does what needs to be done, sends it back, marks it as completed, then it's going to go into review, the state of review. Again, all those state changes that I had mentioned earlier. And the workspace is going to get also notified. And if there is a lead assigned to this task, that lead will get a specific inbox notification, both email and on here, telling them basically like, hey, you need to come here, you need to check this and complete this task for this client. And there will be a field to add internal instructions to kind of explain. Maybe somebody doesn't know what necessarily needs to be done. You can create a note with alongside instructions on how to complete the task. They complete it, and then they come back here, mark this as completed on the organization side, and it'll be marked as completed. And then you'll be able to see, as you can see, like you'll have the messaging, and then interleads will be cards as you move along the step, and then you can always message if you need more clarification or anything, both sides. But that'll be the general flow that I'm kind of going for. And overall, I did a pretty good job of initial setup. I won't do too much optimization on the back end until I get everything like fully functioning, and then I'll go in and like cut down on some of the excess code or move some things around, or make things into one shared component. Just little things that you always have to do for optimization. I try to kind of leave that to the end. But as you see here, you come to task. It's now listed. That I need to really style these cards, and you'll be able to filter based on status. And then I need to place this into the actual overall parent component, so you can add a task from anywhere on the sidebar, like you can with notes. Same thing, create a note. You can assign somebody so they get all the notifications. Similar setup is going to be. View, okay. Okay, and now I actually didn't ask it to do this, but it just went ahead and set up an event timeline so you can track the status of said task. So I guess it could show like when client started, client reviewed, all that kind of detailed information of each task, which I actually like a lot, and I think that's pretty dope that they did that. Yeah, I like that. I need to clean this up, but I do like that. I do want to make like an overall project timeline as well. All right, overall looks pretty good. You need to add editing. I don't think they added an edit function for a task yet. I'm gonna accept those changes right now. Lock those in. Make sure the interleaving works. Yeah, I'm gonna change this from messages to just timeline because I don't need a separate timeline component considering this already tracks pretty much everything that you're going to be doing, either you're messaging or you're creating cards. There's no need actions, tasks, so there's no need to add anything else. All right, let's just okay. Seems to be working. Refresh. Yep, that's exactly how I was envisioning it. So that's cool. This needs to be worked on. This is honestly, like I've said before, like I am definitely design focused first. It kind of what helps me understand where I need to go with the code because some people are code first. I'm definitely design first. If it design and I could see how I want to design, I know exactly what I need to do code wise. So I like to do that. Some people literally don't touch the design till the very end. I don't know how to do that. If it don't look good, it's gonna bug the shit out of me. All right, let's could do that. I could just here. I'm gonna tell it to wire up. I need a All right, so I told it to wire up a change this button right here, this view task button, into a create task button so that you can wire just like you can add a node from any route, any view within the project. You should be able to add a task from any kind of view too. So it should be doing that right now. Check the code and see what it's doing. So it's going to patch, and the button is going to patch into the pop-up that's going to handle the dialogue that's going to handle the actual form. So basically, it's taking it out of the task route and then bringing it to the layout route. So that you can use, since this is the parent component for all of my projects, you will be able to um, add a task from pretty much anywhere within the project, which is the functionality that I want to create right now. I don't want to have to like go into my task, then create task. I want to be able to just go into my project, see a task needed, and then click create and add it right there on the spot, no matter where you are. I think that's the appropriate way, user-friendly way to do things. That's one thing I found about AI, and like I've tried a bunch of models. Some are better than others, but overall, they're all not the best in terms of user experience for obvious reasons. They're just lines of code themselves and they're just equations. So they only know what has been written about user experience. They don't necessarily know the firsthand experience. Well, they obviously don't have the firsthand experience of actually creating a good user experience. So like that's one thing that you have to do a lot, I find, is go in and tweak things and change things and make things as user friendly and intuitive as possible. It does a good job of getting it like 90% of the way there, but you always have to go back in there and tell it, not like this, do this instead, blah, blah, blah. And everybody's ideas of UX and user experience is different than others. I just think that's one area that I'm like pretty strong in. So like I notice when something does not feel right pretty much immediately and like know how to get it the way I want it to feel. So I created a type right here, or type right here. I'll do project task form. that should expect same creating the states that it's going to need for the dialogue. This is the state to actually set this thing. Let's do it a little bit differently. And then here's the actual function. Do we handle the creation of the task? It's not an organization member. Nothing, and tell them only members can create tasks. And then create project task format. You're going to safe parse the form with those values. If it's not a success, please test the task form values. Task form. I'm probably not going to even end up needing this because I'm going to handle validation with Zod and React hook forms. I just think it's much more intuitive. It handles everything in line of the form and doesn't even submit. So I'm probably gonna not even have to need this. Please try again. And then set this to true. Here, it's calling my API with the method of post. My intent is create tasks, which I was talking about my switch case. So it's going to read this intent and say, okay, the intent is create task, which I'll show you right now. So it's going to come here in my switch functions or my switch functionality. It's going to read the intent and it's going to be create task, and then it's going to run this. This is why I like doing switch case, because it's very intuitive. Title. This is just the form payload data, which is again safe parsing these create task values, which is being set here, which is a little bit different than what I normally would do. I might end up changing that. I probably will, because when I switch it to Zod and form, this is not how it's going to be submitting with, but right now I'm just gonna leave it, but it's submitting based on setting the state, and it's going to set the actual title, description, external, all that within the state, and then it's going to pull from that state and run a safe parse on it, make sure it's safe and clean and everything works and as intended, all the fields are there. And then if there's, and it's going to try to call my functionality, and then here's the JSON, and it's going to set the fields pulled from the form, and then it's going to wait for a response. And if the response isn't all right, alert that the failed to create task, otherwise success is true. And if the payload all right, here's that, if it is, then you're going to set the task summary state. Take a copy of what's previously there. You're going to take, all right, because this is the count. So it's going to take the count. It's going to increase the count and increase the pending count to 1, which again, won't need all that. I'll probably just need the total, and I'll cut down on how many calls I need for that. And then you're going to set it here, the values back to nothing. You're clearing the form basically, and then close the dialog and success, and then revalidate. Yeah, this is one way to do it. This is kind of the old way of doing things, especially if you're just working on React. You're going to do a lot of setting states and clearing forms and all that. But once you handle with React hook form and Zod, honestly, this takes away a lot of all of this needs, which can honestly lead to some overlooked, bugs and typos and issues, which I like to do. Again, this is setting the number. And here's the actual dialog. So remove the view task, like I said. I'm gonna go create task. Then here it's gonna update your task summary, which I will get to later, but right now, I'm pretty sure I use React. Yeah, see, I already have React hook form, which use my notes, but it's not using it for this, which is just strictly doing it based on, which is, not necessarily wrong, but not the way I like to do things nowadays. Still got the view task, which is unnecessary because you've got the switcher here already. I'm gonna come here, delete that. Remove that. No, I don't want that. So remove this description and then go active. Perfect. Again, I'm only going to need, I might not even. I'll see. I don't think I need a count. You'll be able to see what's in here. And if it's more than what I'm going to list, I will just have a view more. I'll add one here, two at the bottom, then view all tasks. Same with here. Maybe you scroll down, there will be a view more. And then again, you scroll down, view more. All right, that sounds good to me. So check that. Here's the actual form. Title, description, setting the task. I'm probably going to make that into something cooler, like a switcher. Need to use my combo box. And then all right, so I'm going to tell it to use so I told it to refactor everything and use Zod and React Hook for the form. It just handles validations honestly just way better. I wonder if there's got to be a task. Add CN switcher. Got the switch, but I don't know if y'all know what I mean. I want a switch button though. Kind of like this. The name of those, kind of like these toggle button. Pretty sure this is what I'm talking about. Yeah, something like this. What should I see? Not have that. Just want to toggle switch down. Do a toggle group. Hmm. I'll take a look. All right, so yeah, as you can see, it refactored everything the way I had it previously for my notes. It created a schema using this create project schema type of from my validations. Input created it here as a type so I can call it in my Zod resolver. It's just, yeah, again, see, removed all this here, setting states and setting your values in a state. And I just don't like doing it like that. I just found Zod resolver just very, very easy and clean to use. Again, Zod resolver, create project schema. We'll probably go mode. Should I do it? Do it on blur. Here's the type the values need to match. Again. And then you just call reset. So you're resetting on these. Then it refactored all this to use form. Right here, my form controls from React Hook. So then you get a clean form message. You don't gotta like overthink things. You just put form message and it just displays any errors here. That's much better. Now if I go back over here, do hard refresh. Come here. Did I not put it to Humbler? Oh no, I don't think I saved it. Yeah. Now this should have. Why isn't it handling my? Input isn't handling my errors. This should be a red error. That's weird. So my text area is glowing properly, but these are not. Why is that? This should be. There it is. That's what I expected. All right. I got the title. Fix the description. We're gonna need some info buttons to describe these as well. Change that to 40. Let's try 32. It's good. Let me turn this into a switch toggle. And this should use my actual combo box I have to search. Kernel instructions again. These should be eight. Right, place these side by side. Should have reused it then. So now I can search members depending on how many, because you might end up having like 100+ members of a team, so you want to be able to find them whenever you want. So cool. Reuse that. Place these side by side. Let's go. Selector to a toggle. Select. Place it. Try to place these side by side. The task type in the sign member just gonna make it so much easier. I wanted a toggle switch. I don't really know what Shadzian has. I didn't really see his toggle switch, so I just asked Codex to see what it can come up with. That's actually very close to what I had in mind. Okay, I like that. Still works. Cool. Approval, standard, much cleaner. Messy. All right, that's much cleaner. Much cleaner. Turn that into a hover. Works. John Doe, standard. My title. Upload events to upload. The hour. Let's say, for example, internal instructions. So you're going to assign this to John Doe, so to speak, and he needs to know how to complete this. Review the documents and create a spreadsheet, so to speak, of the information. That's how you complete the task. Here, let's create a Google Drive that's, for example, great. All right, so I created a Google Drive. Let's see, copy the link, come here, paste it. Let's see, let's check the metadata, see if it makes a rich link like I want it to, and then we can style the card from there. So create the task. Task gets properly created right here. Not bad. Here's my signee. Here's the link. Here's the description. If I view the task, here's the internal instructions. Okay, I like that. Review the documents, create a spreadsheet of the information. Here's my timeline. Not a rich link though now, is it? So, for example, if I were to go to rich, it's graph maybe. forget the name of it. Rich link preview. A social share preview. It's basically gonna need to be like this. So if I come here, here's the title, here's the drive. It's basically what I need. Need it to be like this. Like that. Let's go here. Not a rich link. Go to messages. Kind of. All right, so let's take a look at that. So that will be my task. Card. For one, let's I do want to do that with my notes. So my notes, I have a border top on it. Do that for my card. Let's make it. Think of red, meaning it's important. What do you think? Orange is too close to yellow. Where's red? Let's see what else I got. I think red. Looks good. Let's remove the type. I don't think that matters. Mhm. So it's apparently not pulling the link title. Interesting. Changing the gap 3. That's better. Now let's check this. Cool. I like that red. It pops. Um, Probably place you somewhere. I don't know where. Probably gonna place this where this is. This under here. Above there'll be a horizontal menu. Truncate the title. Creation date under here. Should be full. All right, let's do that. Let's go. That's better. Change this one also. Hey, card looking pretty good right now. That this doesn't seem to be grabbing what I need. I'm just trying to figure out how do I want to handle this. Let's do this. All right, so to wire up a horizontal drop down that will let me um, edit the actual task. Right now, I have no way of actually editing this. Added. All right, use React hook form. It brought in my validation to update. Here's the schema that it needs to hit. Notice signees, what is that necessarily forget? Note. Oh. Notice signees is literally just members. Calm that down. Reset everything. Chrome API. Update task. Set task. Payload the task. Here's the horizontal. Test. All right, looks pretty good. Let's go there. Go to my tasks. Interesting. Let's go here. Reading map. Okay. I don't have any type errors. Or do I? No, I don't. That has something to do with my fix that. Has to do something probably with my member assignments. Probably needed a hard reload, honestly. Okay. Now let's try a link that it should be able to grab information from. If not, we're going to have to re-look at how we're getting our metadata. See, so it's got the URL. Here's the title. What the hell? All right, no. Let's go to change it right here. Let's check, make sure it did not. All right, I gotta tell it to reuse my. Assignment on edit text. We'll fix that. Now the styling is all jacked up, but I will fix that now. those changes here. My dialogue. This form field. Should be. Matter of fact, no, I don't, because I don't have that selected here. All right, so let's just try this new. All right, so now I got the title, the actual picture. I go to messages. All right. Again, with my member assignment being gonna have to go in there and fix the member assignment might be undefined, and that's what it's reading. It's not set like that, so let's see. All right, I think it fixed. Cool, I fixed my issues. Task. All right, task. And my card. Grabbing the link to functionality. All right, I'm probably gonna stop there. I'll hop back on earlier and finish this off, but now I'm just figuring out some design things. Functionality's pretty solid right now. Need to scope some editing. Um, Things like you shouldn't be able to edit after a certain point, but you should always be able to edit. Internal instructions. Right now, I have it where you can't edit at all once a client starts the task, which I think is reasonable considering you don't change the scope of a task while somebody's doing it, but you should always be able to edit the internal instructions while it is active because you might need more information that you do not provide. So I need to scope that, which we'll have to do on server side as well. And then I'll still need to make some adjustments here, work out the link issue. Might stylize the link a little differently. Then I need to create cards for this and for the overall look in terms of my dashboard because I will have a task lumped in here. Because I'll have a task here and I'll have cards. I will need cards here for the pending tasks. Yeah, I'll have to hop back on here later. So I'll be back.